Awesome. So we are live now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zones you're watching in. Welcome back again to another amazing show, which is Conversations with Karuna. So today we are going to be welcoming an amazing stalwart whom I have myself been admiring all my HR career, and now as an entrepreneur, I also admire his entrepreneurial capabilities too. So let me welcome Abhijit Bhaduri to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Karuna. I mean, that's a very generous introduction. I'm no stalwart, unless you are referring to years. Then, of course, then it's a giveaway.
I'm
Um,
absolutely referring to the contribution you made to the HR fraternity. So thank you
so
so much
kind of
for
you.
coming
Thank
to
you.
the show. This is an
Thanks for
absolute
having me.
pleasure. So I'm looking forward to an amazing conversation, everyone. And also, please do add in your comments, questions, and we would love to bring them up during our conversations. So today we're going to be focusing on talking about future of work, what are the growth drivers, and also we'll talk about dreamers and unicorns, which is the book that Abhijeet has just come up with, one of his books that he's written. Those who are new to the show, just a little bit of understanding about Abhijeet. He has been in the HR space for several years, and he's contributed to, building up leadership in various organizations like Colgate Palmolive, PepsiCo, Microsoft, and his last stint was with Wipro as a chief learning officer. And right now, he drives his own organization through which he coaches. He's a leadership coach and also working with several organizations and supporting their businesses as well. So, welcome back again, once again, Abhijit, and let us bring in some questions for you. So, I've given a little bit of understanding about your growth in your career and how you worked with various organizations and contributed from the HR space and build businesses with large corporations. But tell us a little more about your younger years when you were. Where are you from? Some background about how you grew to took up this space of work of HR that you started with.
um, this is whenever I have to answer this question, it sort of makes me feel extremely embarrassed because I, have always admired people who have a very clear view of their career and they say, okay, I'm going to do this particular subject, I'm going to do this particular choice of career, and this is how I'm going to specialize. I will work for 5 years as this. I'm just not that person. I right through my school and college, I would take up something and then discover that I didn't like it, and so then I would move to something which I thought I would like, and so my discovery of HR has been completely out of serendipity rather than a great plan or anything of that sort. So that's the first thing that I want to say. Um, I wanted to do something which would have a strong sort of foundation of psychology, which is the subject that I wanted to study. But I ended up studying economics, and because that's what I knew in school, so we didn't have psychology as a subject in school. But during my graduation, I sort of really started to enjoy reading a little bit about psychology and understanding frameworks of theories of personality, etc. And I thought, wow, that would be interesting to know. But it was too late to do an undergrad, so I ended up doing postgrad in human resources. At that point of time, it was called personnel management and personal management and industrial relations, and that's really where it was. The field itself has evolved from there to human resources and now more talent. So that's really the journey, which has been from different aspects of it. I did a degree in law when I after I finished my postgrad at XLRI. So that's really the journey of actually discovering HR.
That's an interesting journey, I think Abhijit talked about. And while he just gets back to us,
Completely out of an actor, I guess.
While he's just getting back. Okay,
Yeah,
he's
I'm back. Sorry.
yeah, we heard you.
Thank you.
So I think
So
go ahead, please.
I think the connection was lost for a little bit. So I was just saying that, for me, it has been just simply an act of serendipity to be able to
Mm,
discover this field, which I, have spent last my entire career in, but, it has evolved in its own way. So in that
mm,
sense, I don't think that I stuck to the same thing because, different aspects became more important. I did stints in different kinds of sectors and organizations. All of it put together, addressed my need for variety. Because I feel that the more variety you address, the easier it is for you to learn about a particular subject. You do many variations of that.
mm,
So it's
mm,
really something like that. When you hear musicians, at the early stages, you're just taught the seven notes, and they give you a whole lot of exercises. Alternate notes. You sing it backwards. Then you do kind of all kinds of variations. In my career, I think that's what has happened. That I sort of learned the seven notes when I was doing my post graduation, and then in the different organizations, I learned variations which have helped me understand nuances of the notes. So
yeah,
that's
but
what
you've
it is.
excelled, but you've excelled in the space that you've been in. So what drove you to excel, even though there is a need of variety that you looked forward to, and I think that's what got you into entrepreneurship as well after a period. But what kept you, you know, focusing on giving your best? What made you excel in the space that you were in?
I don't know about I don't know about excelling or anything because when I was studying, at that point of time, I was really very distracted because, in the sense, I didn't really have a firm view of what I was aiming to do in my career. I was just stumbling across, as I said, trying out different things. So it was more of that kind of a scenario where I would work on multiple things. And at one level, it gave me a view of what I wanted to do. But
Hmm.
once I discovered that my passion really lay in things like, initially I did a stint in management development at Tata Steel. And that was for me, I got back to working with Professor Jitu Singh, who was my, prof at XLR. He was the dean then. And working with him actually in many ways shaped my professional DNA. Then, because the office was located right in the Accelerate campus, it gave me a chance to learn from many of the professors there once again, so I could make up for the lost time, because when I was there as a student, I didn't quite learn in a focused way. It gave me an opportunity to learn from professors like Professor Madhukar Shukla or Geeta Saxena. I was working with some terrific people, my colleagues who were there. And I think I'm a product of the generosity of so many people. They sort of shared their ideas, they've shared their perspectives, corrected what I was doing wrong, and directed me to read up about something and build my understanding of that. So really, I think it's been a journey in receiving from so many people. So
Yeah.
very, very truly,
So,
it's
yeah.
whatever
So
I have had, it's because I've worked with great people.
yeah. So would you agree that being around great people also just kind of sparks that inspiration for any individual as well? And as you say that you have had various amazing coaches as well in your life.
There is no doubt that, there is enough of research which shows that we are guided by the peer group that we sort of
Mhm.
benchmark. So in many senses,
Yes.
even, while I was studying at XLR, I was very lucky to be part of a group which had some absolutely brilliant HR leaders. That batch has
Mhm.
produced so many terrific people. So just being able to sort of be around these people has been a privilege, which has helped me to understand many things. And then, of course, what happens is when you are working with a set of people who are all seeking to excel, you get motivated to do that. But
Absolutely.
later on, I would sort of also modify my statement to say that I think you can learn something from any colleague that you've been around with, any of the managers, including people who I detested at that point of time working with. But even from there, I mean, in looking back, I think many of them taught me things which I was not ready to learn at that point of time, and hence resisted. I was unhappy about it. But in retrospect, even that really helped me. It shaped me, shaped my point of view, shaped my professional DNA, so to speak. So I think hard to say sometimes when you're going through the moment that what is the lesson that you're going to learn out of it. Sometimes it's something that it connects with you only much later. There are
Yeah,
things that I went through maybe 5 years back, 7 years back, which only now makes sense. So I
yeah.
think it's a continuous process. So
Yeah, I think I remember, that brings back my conversation I had with somebody long back. And that person talked about that connecting the dots only happens when you look back. While you are in that point, when you're going through that situation, you might not be able to connect those dots. When you look back, is
absolutely.
when you realize that those life situations of being with some set of peers or coaches or some people just shifted your life in a different way altogether.
And as they say that when like for example, I'll give you a sort of example from drawing. When you draw, one of the things that I always struggle with is drawing something in perspective. That
Mm,
imagine you're looking at a building from the side or at the top, or what does it look like? And
mm,
very often when you start drawing by putting an object in front of you. So if I'm drawing a coffee cup, then you kind of start by putting the coffee cup right in front of you. And you sort
mm,
of draw that out. You sort of look at that.
mm,
But if you have to really learn to sort of look at what does it look like, when you look at it from the top, what does it look like when you hold it from the side like that? I mean, all of that means that you put a certain amount of distance between the object and you. So I
mm,
think in life lessons also sort of work really like that, that, you're putting a certain amount of distance between you and that experience. And
mm.
then you kind of, connect the dots. So I think necessarily it can happen only when a certain amount of time has passed.
Fast. Yeah, makes sense. So you shifted from being in a job to entrepreneurship. What made you choose that transition?
So I think, I've moved between various kinds of organizations and sectors, and I've sort of really enjoyed doing that. I've worked in, starting with manufacturing, large organizations, very small organizations, advertising and
Mm,
communications, retail, sort of consumer goods,
mm,
IT, products, services. And this seemed to be something that I wanted to do, and I thought, let's give it a shot. I tried being an entrepreneur at another point of time earlier, but I sort of decided I wasn't really ready for it. So
yeah.
this time I felt a lot more sure about myself, and I also got a chance to work with a whole lot of interesting people, and got a chance to work with some terrific clients, marquee clients, and that was an opportunity that was hard to give up. So I just continued working on it.
Yeah. So, and we wish you good luck. I'm sure you're doing some amazing work and helping shift the industry trends as well. So, coming to Dreamers and Unicorns, I know this is a new book that you've come up with. Tell us a little more about that. I know you've written another book also. So, a little about that also. We would love to hear about both of them.
Sure. Um, so in terms of my writing, just I started by writing fiction. I wrote, a book called Mediocre but Arrogant, then followed it up with a, sequel to that. And then I thought that, again, from the same perspective of trying variety, I just thought that I would like to really try and build a certain amount of variety in my own writing experience. So I moved from, so I wrote a novel, then I did a sequel, then I moved to writing nonfiction. And my first book was called Don't Hire the Best. And Don't Hire the Best was really about this whole myth that when as a HR person, you're always told that we need to really work with the best. And the research that I did really showed me that that's totally a myth, because success in one's career is really about leverage, building a certain degree of self-awareness. When you build that, it also helps you understand what kind of work you can do and you want to do, because everything that you can do you may not want to do. Yeah.
Mm.
So I could sort of make a certain amount of cooking or some other skills that I have. I may or may not always be keen on doing it. So I think to sort of figure out that, in that two by two matrix, what you can do, what you want to do, is the first part. The second thing is, I discovered that sometimes the organization culture has a very disproportionate impact on um, your enjoyment of the particular process. So suppose you are in a place where your function is not valued, or people don't care about the skills that you bring to the table, or the kind of things that you want to do, your ideas and aspirations, then you don't enjoy working in a place like that. So then, in which case, I just think that knowing how to work with the right kind of an organization can make a world of a difference to you. So there was this, so that was Don't Hire the Best. um, 2 or 3 years later, what the work that I was doing at Wipro gave me an opportunity to look at multiple sectors. And through each of these sectors, I got a chance to really look at, this book. I started to write about all the shifts that were going to happen in the world. And I thought the digital wave, would turn the world into a very different kind of a phenomenon. So, so you sort of really looked at the digital tsunami. That was the name of the book. So the second work of nonfiction that I did was called The Digital Tsunami. It talked about um, how our world of work would move from an analog to a digital world. So that was the second book, which was nonfiction. Um, After doing that, I was sort of working on another book, which was about how should people look at the HR processes in a sort of a post-digital world. And I started to write about that, and then of course the pandemic happened. And one of the first insights that I had was, so of course, we were all struggling to figure out how long is this going to last? How would it change? Would we go back to work at all? And all those kind of questions. If you just jog your memory back to the early days of the lockdown, I kind of thought that this is, so the hypothesis that I was exploring and researching at that point of time was that work, worker, and workplaces actually works in a very tight kind of a tandem. So you change work, so in the industrial revolution, when first industrial revolution changed work from agriculture into the industry. And that meant you needed a very different kind of worker. And the workplace also was the factory. It was no longer the field. So that's a very vivid description of how these three work together. Um, when work changed, because you could now sort of look at doing work from anywhere, so looking at all those options, work moved to the cloud, mobile became accessible to everybody. Certain kind of software made things easier to connect, and so then it changed the worker. So white collar work became very different. And the workplace was actually, in that sense, a little slower to adapt, because many of the policies that we have are really, century old policies. For example, the whole notion of careers. When we look at it, careers moves across this whole belief that, you have a learn, earn, and retire, three-phase kind of a life. As compared to that, now you discover that learn and earn are sort of really moving in tandem. You can't do one without the other. So that requires a very different kind of a mindset. The workplace, today the shelf life of an organization has shrunk dramatically. So, and human beings are living longer. So the moment you sort of put these together, you suddenly discover that every individual is going to have to take up different kinds of assignments in different places of work, and that number is going to move from, at a point of time, we used to sort of start your career with one organization and stay the course and emerge at the other end. So we had that. There was career 1.0. Then you had career 2.0, which was that you actually would be an engineer, perhaps, as an example, and then maybe you did something completely different. You became a musician. So there was a career 2.0. Career 3.0 is what we are going through today for so many people, including myself, that you work on the same day, use a portfolio of your skills, you work for a portfolio of clients, and you sort of earn at different paces depending on the kind of skill that you have. So I do work as a brand evangelist for organizations. I coach individuals and leaders in building their personal brand. I work with individuals on their career transition, and I work with organizations on crafting their talent strategy or their cultural transformation.
Mm.
Each one of these is part of the portfolio that I work with. And that portfolio together is me. So my career in that sense is not with one individual or one organization or something. Actually, I'm working with individuals as well as organizations, all on the same day, doing different things. So that's potentially going to be the other thing that I've talked about in my book, Dreamers and Unicorns. So it's really about the post-pandemic world. It is the post-digital world. So that's really what I thought I should write about.
Yeah, pretty interesting. And what you're saying makes absolute sense because when I look around, not myself as an HR person only who's shifted from a job to, being an entrepreneur myself and, moving around, as you rightly said, not just working with individuals, but also corporations. I see that happening around us with so many other people also, not just in
Totally.
HR, but also in various other functions where people have been in different functions. Look at marketing professionals stepping out to take up, several roles where they are now consultants for
Yeah.
organizations or digital marketing support that they might be providing to organizations. So very rightly put that now we are seeing a transition happening, and I really love the concept that you talked about. That yes, no more are we doing learn, earn, and retire. Now it is more like learning and earning going together
Go
till
together.
yeah till it's like an infinity till you are living. You want to kind of go ahead and keep doing that.
Yeah, I
And
mean, so if you sort of really look at all those assumptions that, you would sort of say that I, this is the amount of money I intend to make. A lot of people would describe their career goals like that. When you think about it, I mean, even assuming you make that, you hit your jackpot, whatever be that number for you, assuming you sort of you create your own startups fresh out of college, it sort of gets picked up by one of these FANG companies, and then you've made your millions. Even if you've done that, I mean, and I know so many people who've sold, had successful exits and all that, none of them are sitting at home and drinking beer and watching movies. All of them are actually working much harder. They are doing many different things, and they're sort of exploring different ideas they've had about life. They're helping others. They're doing some kind of work for others, some kind of work for themselves, some experiments with their own life. So people, even if you think about life, it's working like a portfolio, just as much as I described work as a portfolio. Your life is also a portfolio now, many different things. So hitting a financial goal is no longer signifying the end of your career.
yeah,
Career is your journey through life. So then it's really going to continue much longer, in fact. And today our longevity is much higher. So today the average longevity in India is about 72 years, and at
mm,
1947 it used to be 35 years. So it is doubled.
mm,
And now in the next couple of years, it's going to go up to 80, 90, 100. So
yeah,
if it is going to be that much, people cannot retire at, whatever, 70 and expect that, next 30 years they will do nothing. They'll go crazy. I mean, they may live, but they'll not, you'll need to be mentally well as physically, active,
Mm.
etc.
Yeah.
So it's just a very different way of living your life and looking at your work and life in tandem with each other.
Yeah. So, what are your views on future of work, and how do you see? I remember reading an article talking about 4 V's of creating, jobs in India. So, what do you see as the future of work specifically if we talk about India?
So I think there are two broad trends that I would sort of really look at. One is, I think, when jobs get created, the 4 V's that you're talking about. I initially actually wrote about 3 V's and then added a fourth one earlier in the year,
Mm.
which is video visuals, uh, you know, video visuals and vernacular, for example, and vocal. So which is word, a lot of the search that we do is driven by voice. So voice is one of the big drivers of opportunities. It's going to drive business models, so voice-based commerce, conversational commerce is going to sort of become much bigger, especially in a place like India where visuals and voice will drive a lot of growth opportunities. The second thing that I have talked about is, how do you create things like, what the term I've used is pin code based jobs, which is, there is another set of jobs which are going to come up, which are going to be pin code based, means work in a certain, pin code where you are living. And that drives a certain set of opportunities. So people, if you look at it, part of it was triggered even by the pandemic. Though I sort of wrote about pin code based jobs much earlier.
Mm.
My view was that the opportunities that people want to be able to work out of different places. So when the pandemic happened and offices shut down, there were people who worked out of the PG, set up wherever they were. Many of them decided that they would go back and sort of work out of their hometown. So they did that. Then there were people who decided to, sometimes be in the hometown, sometimes be at a hill station. So work from home, WFH, became home, hometown, and hill station. I mean, so he sort of really worked right across in that sequence. So I
Yeah.
think location will become, a little bit sort of irrelevant. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a hybrid workplace. So you'll probably have different people working on different kinds of setups. Some people would like to keep this location free, work out of any of these places. But at the same time, some of the employers are going to insist that you come in to work, at least a certain number of days a week.
Mm.
And the individual may also have the limitations that I want to work for some days of the week, out of my home. So
Mm.
it is going to be, we've in the pre-pandemic world, we've had a scenario where everybody worked, in one common uniform office because the
Mm.
office was a common workplace, co-located. You and I, we work together as neighbors. One set of rules actually work for everyone. Now
Mm.
you're going to be in a scenario where you'll probably not have one common set of rules for everyone, but you're going to
Mm.
have, between the employer and the employee, it's going to be an individual contract that will be crafted. So I
Mm.
think that's going to be a big shift in the way that we manage people in the workplace. So I think that's going to be a thing. So three things: video, voice, visuals, and vernacular. The 4 V's that will drive how we communicate, how we work. We talked about pin code based jobs. I talked about careers 1, 2, and 3. And of course,
Mm.
now, that WFH, the H is going to be hybrid. It's going to be home, hometown, hill station, or anywhere else.
That brings in another challenge for organizations and HR people, specifically when it comes to engaging them and also measuring their performance, productivity, and making sure that they are doing, giving their best, the 100% that the organization might require to it. So, do you have any views around that? That what, humanizing the connection? Because, when I'm working along with my colleague, I have that emotional connection with that employee, and both of us are working in a team. There is a sense of belongingness. Those things I think are getting impacted when people are working from remote locations.
Yeah. So, when you sort of really look at that, one of the reasons why, um, people want to go back to the workplace because, there's a certain value of that camaraderie. Work
Mm,
is not really just about the transaction of work.
yeah.
And when people talk about, but I could work from anywhere, if you're in an individual contributor role, possibly yes. But I think progressively that individual contributor role or the solopreneur kind of a thing, it's just one set of people, for whom location is not going to matter. They don't work in teams. They're just sort of doing their own thing. They submit their work and they're done. They move to the next kind of project. A number of freelancers work like that.
Mm,
So in Dreamers and Unicorns, I've talked about some examples of digital nomads who work out of different countries at different points of time, do the project, move to another country. So that's the nature of their work. But in many places where the work needs people to work together to sort of collaborate with each other, sort of do that. Yes, there are collaboration tools, but there is a certain amount of connect and the sort of bond of the colleagues, which is impossible for technology to replicate. I mean, this experience of connecting with people on a Zoom call, it's efficient. I mean, you can just, you don't need to drive somewhere. It's a way, you're not spending time in the car or a vehicle or whatever you use to get to work. But at the same time, you have to realize that our bond with the organization, with our colleagues, is a very important part of our mental health. And isolation it really wreaks havoc on mental health, which is why we are seeing so much of that rise in mental health challenges that
absolutely.
people find it very hard to feel isolated. They have no one to talk to, and it's impossible to have that spontaneous conversation. And these are things human beings strive by. And I'm not
Mm,
looking at a handful of people who are saying, "Oh, thank God, I don't have to see another human being." Maybe there are people like that for whom it's a relief that they don't need to do that. But even for them, working with other human beings is actually, it's something that keeps you mentally healthy and agile. So
yeah.
I think, this is one of the reason to go back to work, to an office, may not be to do the work per se, but to socialize. Just as much as I believe that people will want to go back to colleges. When you sort of really look at it, think about a parallel example. There's so many people who got admission to college, and they say, why should I pay so much money for the Zoom call? I mean, effectively, if you think about it, the learning is taking place. So you cannot fault the
Exactly.
college. They are saying that, we are providing you the education, and, you've got your online classes. The teachers are actually working harder. Online is much tougher to deliver.
Yes.
So what really are the people missing? They're missing the experience of being back into a campus, sitting in the cafeteria, chatting with the friends,
Yeah.
sitting there with the people. Yeah, the experience of being on a campus is impossible to replicate on Zoom. It doesn't matter how good your technology is. You can use AR, VR, all of that. You can do all of that, but it does not provide to be a substitute for the human contact. And I think when people are looking at workplace or learning purely as an efficiency dimension, they are missing the whole point. Work is not about efficiency. Work is also about the human side of the workplace. So
Yes.
you engage with your colleagues, you discuss the ideas with them, you socialize with them, you go out for a meal with them. And that is as much a part of the experience of work. Experience of work is not just the transaction.
Yeah.
So, until we understand that, we are not ever going to be able to solve the mental health crisis that we are going through.
Yeah.
It needs people to come together to work, and of course, you're going to need people to be safe. So, vaccinations are going to be a precondition. I understand all of that. Sanitization and all this health conditions, all that. It's a new variable that has become part of the workspace. Yeah, we will get through that. People will get vaccinated at some point of time, but we have to understand that it's not just about work, it's also about the social aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's where the hybrid models will work better, because those who crave to get back, connect to their colleagues, it'll give them that opportunity that once in a week or twice in a week or maybe once in a month or whatever, they can go and meet their colleagues in various locations that they might be at. And I think that socializing piece cannot be missed, absolutely cannot be missed. So it makes it ever more challenging for not just HR but for business leaders to look at what do we do
Yeah.
in these situations at this juncture. And that's where I
Oh,
think,
and if you see, I'm so sorry. Please
no, no,
continue.
go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, no, I thought you had finished. I'm so sorry. No, what I meant was, if you see, you look at all the, the largest companies, which are arguably the most connected. If you look at Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, all of that, these are the most connected places where they have the technology, they work with that technology, and everything. But each of these places has two things. One, most of them have the largest campuses possible. Apple has a $5 billion campus, spaceship kind of
Mm.
a lookalike. Each of these companies has, during the pandemic, they've actually bought up. I was talking to one of the realty companies that I sort of work with, and one of the trends that they were talking about is worldwide. I mean, many of these companies have picked up real estate in the prime areas at throwaway prices, because when people walked out of these places, they are
Yeah.
all actually, available for a song. And these guys have just signed these places, um, you know. Uh, and this is one. The second piece, most of them, apart from one or two players, which are saying that you can work from home forever if you like. Twitter is one such example, and some of the companies in India have said that. But my guess is that in India it is going to be far more of a back to the office kind of a model. So yes, it will make a certain small percentage of employees unhappy, because it's more convenient. You can sort of manage home and all that stuff. It's easier. But remember that working where we are looking at convenience in a world where the child goes to a school, but when the kid is in the home, and you and your spouse and the family members and maybe your parents and all of that are sharing a room, at that point of time, work from there is less than a positive experience. So you're having to spend time with the kid, you're sharing devices, you're investing in devices, broadband goes for a toss. Is just a different set of infrastructural challenges. And many a times when people make these, and I hear sometimes when these leaders say, "Oh, I've worked out of my home for the last 5 months or last 1.5 years. I don't miss going back to office." I mean, they are assuming that everybody lives in a 5 bedroom apartment. People don't, so we have to be sensitive, and that you are assuming that everybody can afford to invest in that kind of high speed, broadband connection, and that everybody has 5 devices which they can distribute among the family members. So when we make rules, we often make it with the assumption that the world is like ours, and it isn't.
Yeah, and I think this is such an interesting point, because when organizations or leaders are making these kinds of policies or decisions, they're looking at their own selves. They think that this is how the world is. So true, absolutely. That's so bang on to the point that um, not everybody might be living in those kinds of conditions. And that's where I think a workplace which was possibly hybrid is the way to go about for future. So
Yeah,
let's
and also it may mean that the organizations provide that flexibility, that if there is an individual
yeah.
specifically who needs to work from home because of a certain kind of a circumstance, to be
Mm,
flexible about that if the work doesn't get impacted, and the people then figure out how to do that. But
mm,
then just this whole model that um, uh, to not at all come back to the workplace.
mm,
Personally, even though I'm a big fan of technology, and I sort of love that, but I also think that for me the human connection is way more important than whatever technology it is, and it's never ever a substitute. So
never.
having a conversation. Think about it. I mean, the last one year you may not have met a friend living in another city, when you go there and somebody says you can't, I mean, you're having these virtual coffees, so you do that. To me, it's a make believe thing. I actually find it incredibly silly, that we are having a pizza together, you are eating in your place. That's not the experience of having a meal together. In which case, why don't we do a Zoom call with the family? Each one eats in their own room or place, and we can sort of have that. Why isn't that the norm in the family? The
Yeah,
reason is that it's different when you are working together with people. So I
yeah,
think that's really what I would sort of
yeah, yeah.
advocate for.
In a different perspective, because I practice and I promote mindfulness as well. I feel that we as human beings, we absorb a lot from our sensories also. We see, we touch, we feel, and that physical presence, that energy of the person being around us, that aura that we
Yeah.
have, that makes so much of a difference. And that connection, 1.5 years now that I'm let's say working from home, I might not have made new friends as compared to if I was, let's say, working in my office. There would have been many more new friends I would have made. I would have shared my life in a very different way altogether. So I think we all, as human beings, miss that a lot. And at workplaces, organizations will have to think of what are those unique, flexible methods, models that they can bring in to make that shift. And I think each to its own in that process, and that's where the flexibility organizations will have to showcase.
Yeah, it's really like asking, how many deep friendships have you made, which have started and continued just being online, and count it against the deep friendships you've built with people when you've met them. So I think
Absolutely.
that's the answer. So we have get-togethers on on the video with my classmates, but it is not the same as
Yeah.
being there in the home of one of these people and laughing
Yeah.
about something, and it's not the same. So
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of being there, because for me the human touch matters a lot more, and I'm sort of, for me, technology is an enabler. If I uh, can't sort of go across and meet you there, I'll send you a text message. So that doesn't mean I'm going to live my life through a text message.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some interesting comments where Vikas is talking about, he finds it very awesome. Ramesh finds these perspectives very, brilliant. Karan feels that it's a really critical point that you brought up, and our situations are not same, but expectations from us are same when it comes to workplaces. Yes,
Yes.
Karan, I
Yeah.
think in various ways, yes, that's true. But we'll have to find unique ways to continue to be high performing and showcase our productivity. Ashish talks about that how to make and create more human out of human with using tech for all benefits. Big challenge for all of us. Absolutely, Ashish. I think that's
Right.
the conversation we are having right now on this topic as well. That it is a challenge, but we as human beings will have to find unique ways, innovate in this space, and find solutions to that. So coming back to some more questions, Abhijit, we talked a lot about certain achievements that you've had. We're absolutely fan of your books. We are fan of your drawings. We are fan of the work that you're doing. Great work in the HR space that you've done, and for organizations that you're doing right now. I want to bring in a different perspective to talk to you now in terms of while moving through all of this. I'm sure you made some mistakes. I'm sure you had your own learnings, if I have to put it in that way. So, what
Sure.
were those, key learnings or mistakes, if I have to talk in that language, that you could share about, which made an impact on you, and you can kind of recall right now?
How much time do you have for me to answer about all my mistakes? In my life,
Maybe
Karuna,
quickly for
the,
now.
the ratio of mistakes and you know successes, the ratio is extremely skewed in favor of mistakes. So
Absolutely.
way too many of them. If I sort of think that at an early stage, I kind of underestimated the value of having in-depth knowledge, and I think that's one of the things which really I have changed my view on. So when I was in college, I mean, I used to get carried away by this whole point of view that, oh, this is theory, let's just do practical. I mean, yes, you need to certainly try out your ideas in the real world. Of course you need to do that, but there is no substitute for great theory. This is one of the big myths that I lived with earlier, and it was a huge error, which I addressed much later in my life. That I sort of try to go back and read about all the things that I should have read much earlier.
Mhm.
And I think this is, so if I were to go back to college, and or if I were to, look at advising my younger self, I would just say that don't live with that arrogance that, if I've done a little bit of stuff by myself, it really, everything. You don't. And so knowing that. So that was my first big error, which I think haunted me a lot in the early years, because I had to really go back and make up for it. I think the second error that I kind of think that, a lot of times when we look at um, when you look at it, when you join a new place, and in my career I made many shifts, and so I changed careers, I changed organizations and all of that. When you go to a new place, a new organization, there is always a tendency to sort of really say that I people want to go back, go to a new place and prove that they are really smart and they know how to do what they have been hired to do, etc. Whatever that might be, you do that. But I think the mistake that we make is that I think before you sort of really start to prove your competence in the subject matter, I think you need to first build a relationship. So if there is one place where I've changed my view completely, it is that if you don't build a relationship, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how clever you are, and whatever you are going to do, it's not going to happen because um, it is when it, the, later on we discover that your own competence and drive and all of that are great, but if you don't build deep relationships and likability as an important element of success, I think is just completely underestimated, and we overestimate the importance of just pure competence. So nobody likes to have a really super bright person but who is terrible to be around with. And I think that is something that one sees. I've made that mistake, and I see a number of people making that mistake also. So focus pretty much on building that. And I think the third thing that I would say, during the course of the research that I did for my book on, dreamers and unicorns, one of the things that I kind of found as a big element of shift in the leadership models, leaders have always been people who people have looked up to have answers. I have a question, the leader has an answer. We are now in a very funny stage where the difference in knowledge between the leader and the led, the followers, that is very minimal, because, if I were to, for example, if I were to ask you, when do you think things will come back to the January, 2020 phase? Nobody has an answer. If I say when will trade resume at a certain kind of a level, nobody has an answer. So the difference between what an expert has, because there are no experts, and the average person, that gap has narrowed a lot. I'm not saying that experts are not needed. There are, But we are living in times where the number of people who have deep expertise in that area is limited. These are people who have built it on insights. They've built it not on data analysis, because data analysis is always looking at the past. So these are people who built it on insights, predictions, trends, and they've understood all of that. So when you look at that, the importance of humility as a big leadership trait, we underestimate how important that is. And the pandemic has certainly proved that the leader must have the humility to listen from multiple sources inside the organization and outside. Also, to be able to accept very comfortably and say, "I don't know. Explain to me how that works." So, this is a big shift in the way leaders have operated. So, I think these are my three big learnings from my own mistakes, which I've made so many of them. But these are the top three, I would say.
Amazing. I think it makes so much of sense when we talk about that in today's time. There are not The knowledge is so readily available that leader is not sought after because for knowledge, but the leadership capabilities that they showcase, the human connection that they showcase, the humility that they showcase, and that makes us respect them. That's why we would respect a leader, because knowledge is now just very easily available for anybody to pick up. So this, I think, for me personally, has been an observation, and I think today when you articulated it, I think I'm going to take that back as a learning for myself too. That when and that's very relevant, because when I, let's say, work with younger people, maybe interns or anybody else who's got less years of experience, from a knowledge point of view, sometimes I'm actually learning from them.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
Um,
a very good point.
but what would be your what can you share from your mistake which I can learn from? So then it's a fair trade.
Okay. That's an interesting question. I generally ask questions, but this is the first time that somebody's asked me a question in this conversation that we do. But I think what I have learned is also one of the things that when I am working with people around me, sometimes I have been pretty I go by the rule. So rather than going by the rule that, okay, these are the things that we need to do, I'm a leader and I know more, I have realized that it makes a lot of sense that I open up, be more democratic in approach, rather than as a leader continue to think that, okay, I know more, I have more experience than going ahead and listening to the other person. Yes, I when I was in my job, many a times I've been open to perspectives where my team members would share during conversations, but sometimes the decision making is with me. Now it is these are times when I feel that each individual needs to be respected for the quality, the capability that they bring in to the table, and that shifts a lot of the work that we are doing. And that is why I feel in the coming times, from a workplace point of view, gig economy is going to pick up a lot. And that is my
Hmm.
learning also, that respect each person for the what they are, and not just look at it like this, that, okay, I am a leader, I am a decision maker, so they might not know enough of things. So that is something I feel that it gives one, a gig project will give people the capability to be looked at as experts to whatever they are doing. And also, it's a flat kind of a hierarchy. So I will be respected only if I um, create my executive presence in a way which can shift and influence you. So that's,
Sure.
I think, my learning over all of these 1.5 years.
How nice. Makes so much of sense. Absolutely. Thank you. It's very useful.
Thank you so much for asking that. So Karan says leadership is no longer about leading through knowledge only, but to making stronger and deeper connections at human level. Thank you so much, Karan, for writing that.
Perfect.
Madan Paulak is talking about it's a wonderful experience listening and learning from Abhijit, whom I admire and follow his work. So, absolutely, yes, Madan, I am there. Absolutely agree with you on this point. Again, I think people are talking about human touch. Thank you, Abhay, for your pointer. Awesome conversations indeed. And yes, of course, Ashish, he's talking about your amazing storytelling skills. So, Abhijit,
How
as we
nice.
move ahead, I think we heard a few stories that you showcased from your past experiences. Uh, I would love to know more about anything that you would like to share for people who are looking at being more creative, and how can we sustain creativity, in these
Mm,
times, projects, gig projects, working from home, coming up with new talent solutions, how to engage people. These are all so many problems or challenges we all have. How can we ensure that we are creative and we sustain creativity? So any thoughts on that you would like to share with our audience?
Uh, I think creativity, in my mind, has two sides. It's a two-sided coin. One side is what I think people generally understand, and they do it instinctively also, I think, which is that you sort of talk to different people, you go beyond your own comfort zone, you look at different disciplines, you see different places, you read subjects which are different. For example, some things that I find very useful to do is on Twitter, I periodically change the people who I follow, and take on people from either different age groups or different leanings, different professions. So what it does is sometimes it gives you a point of view which is very different from what somebody else, what so the more diversity of relationships and experiences and knowledge that you have, the more creative you are likely to be, because you will draw from multiple sources. Instead of having just one tap at home from which you fill up water, having multiple taps gives you more flexibility. So that's the divergent aspect of ideation. So the more you sort of look at many different things and you sort of try out, and you get that. Yeah. Um, the second part is actually the tougher one, and I believe that in the creative process, it is an 80-20. 20% is what we just spoke about, that you build a degree of variety in your interactions, meet different people, go to different things, do different things. Someday you try pottery, someday you try painting, someday you sort of do singing, someday you talk to friends. That's the 20%. And that sort of feeds in. It's really like chopping the vegetables when it comes to cooking. So that's the chopping the vegetables, because without a variety of vegetables, you are going to end up doing the same thing over and over again. The second part is actually the tougher one, which is that how do you build a certain degree of discipline where you sit down and work on your craft every day. So creativity, anyone can do something creative on one particular day. You come with a brilliant idea, and so everybody applauds you. The magic of creativity is not being creative on one particular day, but being creative day in and day out, every single day, and then eventually you build your muscles such that you can be creative on tap. So for example, as a writer, when I do columns for different magazines or something, sometimes the value that I bring to the table is, a magazine can say that, we are on a deadline. Somebody, wants this particular article turned out in the next 2 days. It's something that I take pride in saying that I can do that. Because over a span of time, I think when you keep building the ability to write on different topics at very short notice, you're forcing your own mind to be creative on tap. And I think that's the real definition of creativity. You don't sort of think about, when you look at any of the people who you think are really creative people, they don't just have one song that they have churned out. They do hundreds of songs. And Out of that, a certain percentage is going to be great. Academics who are really top academics churn out paper after paper after paper. They're really hugely productive. You look at the classical composers, whether it's Beethoven or closer home. When you look at R.D. Burman, S.D. Burman, some of my favorite composers. Gulzar Saab has been writing for poetry for decades. He's done everything. He's written screenplays, he's done movies, he's directed, he's written, he's put songs, he's you know kavali, all kinds of moods. That to me is what builds your creative muscle. So many different influences and many different formats in which you create. So I think that's how I would sort of summarize it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective to look at it. Absolutely, Karan is talking about multiple taps of creative expression, which you shared about. DK Bakshiji, thank you. Another person whom I admire quite a lot, and I think DK Bakshiji is loving your conversation too. So Karan has a question: is creativity teachable?
Yes, of
Any
course. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is teachable. I kind of always think that there are two elements to this. One is what somebody can teach, the other is what you can learn. So, because, you know, teaching is what somebody else brings to the table. So, there's a structured way in which you can sort of learn, whatever it is. Yeah, learn to sketch something. There's a structured way in which you do it. And today on YouTube, for anything and everything, there is somebody who's done a series of videos which has broken these things down, whether it's learning a language or whether it's creativity, etc. All of that, it's possibly there. I think when you look at creativity specifically, a lot of it has to do with the different things that you try out. As I said, that if you, I like to get better at my own writing. That's my aspiration, to be good at writing. So then I write every day, every single day. Whether it's getting published or not is irrelevant. I'll write, and I write in different formats. I mean, in a tweet is done in a certain number of characters, 280 characters. You learn to.
Okay, we can't hear you. I think your voice is just cracking up. We can't hear you yet. If you could just. Okay. So we can't hear him yet. Maybe he's just setting up his audio and we'll be back. But I think what we heard made a lot of sense when it comes to creativity, that it does make a lot of, you can learn creativity and there are a lot of various ways of doing that. So back to you, Abhijit. You wanted to finish up on this answer?
No, I just think that trying out different formats every single day. So whether it's writing, you write for different formats, different kinds of audiences you can write for, different techniques you can try. So the more you sort of try out anything, so it's really like saying, how do you become a better football player? I mean, you practice every single day, I guess. So that's how any craft is learned, like that. So
Yeah.
no great magic to it. I mean, it's barely 5-10% is what somebody teaches you, but I think a lot of it is what you nurture in the craft. So
Yeah. So the two bit I would add is, I think if we stay consistent to it, consistent to that, yes, I do want to do something differently, that helps a lot as well. So that approach, that mindset to do things differently consistently, that will make a shift as well.
absolutely.
So Abhijit, would love to know more about some personal practices that you have that help you to keep going, in terms of any practices that you have that you can share with our audience.
Um, no, I mean, so personal practices, that's a tough one. I don't, I mean, as I said, I think the only thing that I sort of do diligently is I write and draw every day, both things I really enjoy doing. So that's something that I uh, really am diligent about. I think that's the only thing I'm diligent about, if I will. I enjoy reading. I enjoy listening to music. I like to talk to my friends, and I love travel. That's the one thing I sorely miss. Sorely miss. But yeah, I mean, so in terms of a daily practice, I think the only thing that I would talk about is I like listening to podcasts. So I sort of walk around, in the place where I live. I go for a walk and I listen to podcasts. So that's one place where I so really listen with great degree of concentration, and
Amazing.
yeah, I really enjoy doing that.
You have your own podcast as well. Would you like to talk about that to the audience?
Yeah, so I did, I did a bunch of podcasts which are called Dreamers and Unicorns. It's there on the net. It's also on my site, abhijitbhaduri.com. But I also now, yesterday evening, in fact, I sort of launched the second season of my LinkedIn live chats, which I do by and large on most Wednesdays, Wednesday or Friday, if there is a clash somebody has. But usually Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. IST, I invite a bunch of guests, and we've had, all range of people from, the chairman of SoftBank India, and stand-up comedians like Papa CJ, and, had writers. And then we've had all kinds of people. Last evening we had Saul Kaplan, who was there. Next week we have Greg Settel, who's coming in. So these are all people who are really people who are path breakers, and they've done a bunch of different things. So it's amazing to actually have the kind of conversations with them, and it's such a privilege to be able to do that. So I think
Absolutely.
that's really what I've enjoyed doing. Uh,
Amazing. Any advice you might have for professionals, specifically those right now in the challenging times, about their careers? We talked about the career 3.0. We've talked about workplaces or future of workplaces. Any advice that you might have for them?
Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified to give any advice, because I think everybody deals with their own life in their own unique way. So
Mm.
uh, I'm not a great fan of the advice part of it, but I think that this too will pass. I mean, I've sort of always believed that whenever I've gone through a bad patch, and this is one line I genuinely believe in, and I think that good times and bad both pass, pretty quickly. So this will get over before you think about it. But I also think that one difference as an entrepreneur, as a salaried employee, your worth is sort of you build your reputation and you build your work based on the what you do on a Monday through Friday. Yeah, in some sense, that's what you're doing in the workspace. As an entrepreneur, you build your value by all the things that you do on the days when you're not working. Not working in the sense you're not delivering something. So the white spaces are really far more precious as an entrepreneur. And that, I think, the moment you have that, then you stop sort of, you look at your white space and your downtime in a very different way, because you really then begin to think it is precious.
Mm.
And that is that's again one of the things that I've learned over the years, that if you're able to sort of shift that perspective, you really, so as an entrepreneur, you have to stop focusing on what you're delivering and what you're getting billed for, because then you are really, well, of course, one set of people, they like to do something on a repeated basis. It's a cookie cutter. You have a canned program, you sort of delivering that 365 days a year, which is great, nothing wrong with it. It's not something that works for me, but for me, being able to sort of build that variety and depth, and create something new every time. The only way you do it is that you really focus on what do you add to yourself in the moments when you are not delivering something. So if you are not on that deadline, what are you doing? So that time becomes really precious. So I would sort of really focus a lot more on that, because that's really for me the big differentiator.
Differentiator. Yes. And I think in these times, it makes a lot of sense to utilize that and build up something very unique, which is more, like you as an entrepreneur or as an individual. So, as we're coming towards the end of this conversation, Abhijit, even though we would love to continue to keep talking to you, it's such an amazing, valuable conversation that we've had. I wanted to, talk about conversations with Karuna. This is a channel where we bring in feature successful leaders like you who've had built up their careers in in their unique ways, and from their wisdom talk about learnings that can help people build their career in life that they love. So we're supporting through this channel by creation of conscious cultures, leaders, and careers. Any feedback that you might have for us that you might want to leave?
No, I just want to say, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come onto your channel, meet your audience, and I discovered also a bunch of old friends there. So that's great. Thank you so much. Also want to apologize for twice. I think the the connection dropped. My apologies
That's
for that. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I think technology sometimes doesn't support, and it's okay. I think we have to just maneuver through that. And thank you so much for giving us time. This was a beautiful, valuable conversation, and I really loved so many learnings that we got from it, and so many comments and so many questions that came in as well. Thank you, everyone, for watching it as well. And thank you, Abhijit, for this lovely time that you've given to us.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for having me here, and good luck with all your future ventures. Thank you, Karuna.
Thank you so much. And we're going to be back again with an amazing, a session again next Thursday. Keep watching it. And thank you so much till then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.